Order this meeting of the Noblesville Common Council for Tuesday, March 29th. Mr. Schwartz, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Lees, will you do the roll call?
Mr. Ayr, Mr. Boyce, Mr. Davis,
Present.
Mr. O'Connor,
Present.
Mr. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz,
Present.
Mr. Smith,
Present.
Mr. Sparks,
Present.
Ms. Wiles.
Present.
Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from our March 15th meeting.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from March 15th. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Next is approval of the agenda.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I have a few cards that have been received. If anyone else would like to speak, please fill out the card and you can hand it to the clerk. I am going to ask that you all provide new information or a new topic. There have been several items that were addressed at our last meeting, and those have been researched and responses have been sent out to the residents and citizens. So I'd ask that any comments tonight is new information. Mr. Mayor, do you have any comments this evening?
Briefly, good evening, Madam President. First of all, it's great to be with all of you, and I hope that I'm sure every citizen of Noblesville who is in Florida this week is probably live streaming tonight's meeting, so we hope they're enjoying their spring break. And for all those of you who will be traveling the next couple of weeks, please do so safely. I have a quick, a happy announcement to make, and it's a kudos to Ali Krupski and our engineering department. You'll remember about a month ago we were awarded through the Metropolitan Planning Organization nearly $12 million for infrastructure projects, including a sizable chunk of that for our Pleasant Street expansion, which was one of the largest awards the city of Noblesville has ever received. Well, our team did some digging, and it's hard to believe that in a city like Noblesville, that is now the 10th largest city in the state of Indiana, that we do have still some rural parts of our community. And in fact, because of some of those rural parts, we classify and are eligible for some different funding buckets through the state of Indiana. So there was a rural call for projects, and because of an area that Noblesville is located in, we were actually awarded $7.7 million additional dollars for the expansion of Oleo Road from 146th to 156th Street. So that'll be coming up here in several years, but a huge win for the city of Noblesville. I imagine here in the next several years we will fall out of that rural category, but we will, in the meantime, be taking advantage of wherever we can going forward to make sure that we amplify dollars back here to our local community. Anyone who is an East Sider, Madam President, as I know you are, knows that is a area that will have substantial growth going forward. So that construction of Oleo Road, which is currently a rural 2-lane roadway, to a 4-lane road with a grass median between 146 and 156 will be a welcome addition for us going forward. So I just want to say kudos to our engineering department for looking out for these opportunities to make sure that Noblesville gets its fair share of state and federal dollars when it comes to infrastructure projects going forward. So just wanted to share that with you, and happy to answer any questions that you have, but I know you have a long meeting this evening.
Mr. Mayor, just
Yes.
a quick question. When is that funding scheduled?
I was trying to just say several years from now. It's actually scheduled for fiscal year 2027. I can tell you government moves at a glacial pace, but I still will say thank you for the opportunity. And we'll probably have 3 more children by then, but just kidding. But it's coming. The road, not the kids. All right, thank you so much.
Any additional questions for the mayor as he walks away? Glad that his wife's not hopefully watching. So. Okay. Council committee reports. Mr. Schwartz, do you have a Parks committee report that you'd like to present?
I do have some brief things. They didn't have a whole lot going on. They did meet this month. Brendan Bennett did mention that construction continues on the Hobb Station in the park. They're making their way on cleaning up some things around Hobb Station. The recreation report, they had several programs this month. Everything is going great. Programs so far have brought in $76,000 in revenue. They are planning on putting new floor at the golf course. Let's see. And just kind of going through some of the notes here, just looking year over year, income from the recreation has increased substantially. Just to give you an idea, in 2021, January and February brought in $50,000. This year, January and February brought in $122,000. So there's a lot of increase there. Their goal is to be the #1 recreation program in the state of Indiana, and kudos to them. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Schwartz? Next committee is the Finance Committee. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. We met last Thursday, March 24th, Greg O'Connor, Darren Peterson, Aaron Smith, and myself. Chuck Haberman discussed with us the Economic Development Agreement and Economic Revitalization Area Designation for Texon Towel and Supply. Chuck also discussed Economic Development Plan Amendment for Washington Business Park and the bond authorization for the Washington Business Park Phase 2. Andrew Murray discussed with us the bond authorization for Innovation Mile land acquisition. Matt Light and Jeff Spalding discussed our American Rescue Plan Act spending plan revision. And Sam Barris discussed fiscal actions for the Logan Street Bridge enhancement, which is the Bridge of Flower. That and the claims docket does come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Davis?
Madam President,
Mr. Smith?
I move to approve the claims as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the claims as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Okay. Previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance 1003-22, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund for acquisition of real estate. Mr. Barris.
Thank you. We do have Mr. Spalding here tonight, but since I discussed this last time, we thought I would just finish it tonight. So as mentioned, second reading, so this is for final approval of this additional appropriation of almost $2.2 million from the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. That's the money we received through the American Rescue Plan, ARPA Act. This is our rest of our first tranche of money that we received in 2021. We're going to be receiving a second tranche here in 2022. So again, this is covering a portion of the cost of a property acquisition related to the Pleasant Street project. That agreement and that funding structure was discussed at length at the last council meeting, so I'm not going to rehash all of that unless there's specific questions about that. Happy to take any questions. That I'm good.
Any questions for Mr. Barris?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would-
We need to establish
a
or open a public hearing.
Open it.
So-
Yep, thank
So
you.
I am opening a public hearing for ordinance 10-03-22.
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
seeing no one from the public coming forward, I'd move to close the public hearing for ordinance 10-03-22.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for ordinance 10-03-22. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Now, Mr. O'Connor.
Now, Madam President, I move we approve previously discussed ordinance 10-03-22, approving additional appropriations in the American Rescue Plan Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sparks?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is approved.
Thank you. Moving on to council to consider ordinance 11-03-22, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the debt service COET sinking fund for debt service payments. Mr. Barris.
Thank you, council members. Again, this is the second reading of this one. This is an additional appropriation for $200,000 from the COET Debt Sinking Fund. This is a fund that we deposit a portion of our annual local income tax distribution into each year. It has approximately $1 million sitting in its cash balance. And what we've been using this money for is making payments on debt service that we're paying due to the construction of the Levinson parking garage. We issued bonds to pay for that. When we did the 2022 budget, we'd envisioned $200,000 of that debt service payment being made from a tax increment financing or TIF fund. Based on more updated TIF revenue projections, we now think we won't quite have $200,000. So what we're asking you to do is approve us to spend up to that full $200,000 amount out of this fund to make sure we have authority to cover the full debt service payment. With that in mind, we will use any TIF increment we get to help pay down that debt service. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Barris? Then I will open the public hearing for ordinance 11-03-22.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith?
seeing no one from the public come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing for ordinance number 11-03-22.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Ms. Lees? Oh, no, we need
Madam President,
Mr. Smith.
I move to approve ordinance number 11-03-22.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Now, Mrs. Lees. Sorry.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sparks?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
7 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is approved.
Council to consider ordinance number 12-03-22, an ordinance for the change of zoning from R1 low-density, single-family residential and FH flood hazard to R3 moderate to high-density, single-family residential and FH flood hazard for approximately 153 acres adjacent to East 161st Street, Mill Creek Road, and East 171st Streets. Ms. Ashelman.
Good evening. The request before you is for an R3 PD.
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and read the
Oh,
next ordinance
that's
so
right.
that we can discuss them together, and then we'll vote on them separately, correct? Okay. So council to consider ordinance 13-03-22, an ordinance for the change of zoning from R3 moderate to high-density, single-family residential and FH flood hazard to R3-FH/PD residential flood hazard plan development for approximately 153 acres adjacent to East 161st Street, Mill Creek Road, and East 171st Street. Now, Ms. Ashman.
Good evening. The request before you is for a change of the base zone district from R1 to R3, and then approval of a PD overlay for a residential subdivision to be known as Magnolia Ridge, and it would have a total of 339 residential units within the development on approximately 153 acres. The item comes to you from the Plan Commission with a favorable recommendation to adopt, and that vote was 6-0. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them, but I don't want to repeat too much from the last meeting if I don't need to.
Any questions of Ms. Ashelman? Does the presenter want to say anything?
Good evening, Mark Gradison, Gradison Land Development. Offices is 6330 East 75th Street, Minneapolis, Indiana. Madam President, members of the council, thank you again for having us this evening. I simply would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this point. I don't think we need to go through the full presentation again, so please let me know if I can answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Graddison? Mr. O'Connor?
I have one. Given the size of the development, what's the build-out time frame that you're planning on now from a start date forward and phasing?
I would suspect, just given the time of year currently, that we won't have lots come on board until next year, and we would be approximately 5 years for construction of the homes.
Start on the north end?
We'll be starting at both ends
Both
and
ends.
working towards the middle.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to get a sense of how long it was going to take for full build-out, so thanks.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Hopp, if you would like to come up. Again, please state your name and your address, and with new information.
Thank you. I'm Larry Hopp, live at 102 Bays Drive, which is right on the corner on 161st Street. So, and I just have a sort of a question, I guess, for the city planner of, the unique intersection that's going to be on 161st Street with a right in, right out, left in. I just wonder why it's necessary to do that. Not that I'm opposed to it. It would be better for us on Bays Drive as long as we're not impacted where we can't make a left turn as well out of our subdivision. And, is it because of the current traffic, or is it because of poor condition of 161st Street or sight lines or what? So that was,
All right,
more of a question than a comment. Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Ashland, do you want to respond to that real quick?
So the right in, right out, left in configuration was the recommendation of the city engineer, and it deals exclusively with the condition of the small structure, also known as a culvert, that is just east of this development. It's been made very clear through the conditions and through our conversations with the developer that at some point it could be a full access intersection. It's up to the city engineer, but the main reason is because of the condition of the culvert to the east. They wanted the time and opportunity not only to design the fix, but also to have time to complete the repair.
Okay. The next comment card I have is from Jason Smith.
Good evening.
If you please state your name and your address.
My name is Jason Smith. I think everybody knows that by now. But my address is 16555 Seminole Road.
Thank you. For the public record.
I know. I'm here to talk about the safety and the pressure this is going to put on Seminole Road. And with some of the engineering and the planning, it's gotten worse. That is right before the S-curve on Seminole Road. That's my friend and Purple Heart winner, David Craig's fence. And somebody just went straight through that. So you're supposed to go around an S, and I think they were going north to Tipton. And on 171st, where the exit is for this subdivision, the people that go to Indianapolis to work, which will be a lot of people, and Carmel, will turn left and come down Seminole. And one of the worst things I've seen on this planning development, there's been a lot, but is the right turn only on 161st Street. So what is going to happen is Mr. Craig's fence is going to have that happen a lot more times. because we're going to get crunched from both directions. So anybody that does a right turn only coming out who is going to town in Noblesville will come down Seminole Road. They're not going to go to Hazeldale. That's like crazy. They will go to Seminole. They'll go all the way through to Mill Creek and try to turn right on 32. And then we will get the traffic from 171st Street for those folks trying to go to Indianapolis. This road has 6 houses on it, 7 houses, and a S-curve that has not been dealt with. And so I've said this for about 10 years now. We just don't have the infrastructure in that area to deal with another development like this again. And as already mentioned, but an important fact, since this got reopened again about 6 weeks ago, we've also had a truck and a school bus get hit on that S-curve too. And I think it's just extremely irresponsible that this isn't going to be dealt with first before we're going to take on other big subdivisions that could have over 300 homes in them. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next comment card I have is from Sarah Sturley.
Hello, my name's Sarah Sturley. I live at 6575 East 171st Street. I emailed you all this evening, but it was a little delayed because I was trying to wait until the last possible minute. But we have been, just in the last 6 weeks, trying to get other citizens and neighbors' opinions on this, and we're up to 422 Noblesville residents that have signed the petition that I emailed all of you this evening, none of whom are in favor of this dense of a development. So just by my rough math for you at-large members, that accounts for about 11% of total votes, or Mr. Schwartz, who has some of the people in the immediate vicinity. That's obviously a lot bigger proportion. And so people that live right there that have to deal with this are very concerned, and we have made our concerns very clear, and they are not being properly addressed. And we just feel like we're in this process of trying to help you see the foreseen consequences. They're not unforeseen consequences, like Mr. Smith just talked about. Just in the last 6 weeks since it started, we've had 3 accidents in that S-curve. So this is all easily predictable concerns that we have, and that they aren't being addressed, and that you should be thinking proactively about what's to come and kind of protecting our interests there as the neighbors. So thank you for your time.
Ms. Sturley, I have a question for you. The names on this petition, does it names and address?
It is names and city, not addresses
It'd be
and
interesting
emails.
to know how many of those people are residents of the city of Noblesville and pay city taxes.
Okay, I mean, I can I can keep working on that.
I don't know if that's going to be necessary or not, but
Okay.
it's just, you like to make that comment about voters. They
Right,
may
and
not
I
be
mean,
able to
obviously,
vote
not as
for-
many people show up for primary elections either, so I mean, that's not great math to begin with, but I do
They're
think
not
it's
a resident of the city of Noblesville and pay city taxes. They don't vote in Noblesville elections.
correct, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. This is now a matter for vote.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith,
I move that we approve ordinances number 12-03-22 and numbers 13-03-22 as presented.
Second.
it has been moved and seconded to approve ordinances 12-03-22 and 13-3-22 as presented. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sparks?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Before I vote, I just wanted to say something really quick. I don't think this is out of order necessarily, but I think we vetted all these issues. I appreciate everything that everybody has said about it. We've been to the Planning Commission. I think this meets the standards and requirements that we're held accountable for at our level. And the traffic concerns, the reason I asked the question about the 5-year build-out is it'll give us the opportunity to work on some of the traffic concerns, A, B, we can coordinate with the county on some of the 161st Street issues. So those things they don't go unnoticed. I've looked at this for 8 years now. And I think that at this point, the subdivision deserves to be approved. I think the votes are here to approve it, but I just wanted to say that, you know, we're held to a standard here. We can't continually push off things that fit the requirements that are set forth by the state. So I vote aye, but I just wanted to make that statement because I think everybody needs to understand that there's only so much we can do, but we are going to make improvements on those roads and improve that infrastructure, because part of the money that will come out of this development will go to the roads that surround that area. So I just felt like I needed to say that because I've looked at this for a number of years now, and I think this has been looked at and vetted, and we've done everything we can do to make sure that we try to make this as safe as possible, and it will improve over time. So that's all I've got to say.
So that was an aye.
Ms.
And that
Wise?
was an aye, and I voted
Yes,
yes.
yes,
Aye.
I got that, yes. All right.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinances are approved.
Thank you. Next is council to consider resolution RC-12-22, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with Texton Towel and Supply. And we're going to read we've got 4 items that we're going to,
What?
am I out of order?
You're out of order,
I
too.
apologize.
Go to 1503.
I apologize. Okay, new ordinance for discussion. Council to consider ordinance 15-03-22, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the Downtown Development Fund for the Logan Street Bridge enhancements, Bridge of Flowers, and establishing a public hearing. Mr. Barris.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Thank you, council members. This is the first of 2 fiscal actions on the agenda tonight related to this project, which is an enhancement to the Logan Street Bridge. The project's also known as the Bridge of Flowers. So I will be discussing a transfer resolution later on in the agenda that is part of the same funding package. So tonight, council is being asked to consider a total of $765,000 out of the Downtown Development Fund for costs related to this project. This piece is an additional appropriation, so you're being asked to increase the size of our budget for this year by $362,000. For this part of the funding, the plan is for the city to make this payment, but ultimately we will be we plan to be reimbursed by Hamilton County for this portion of the project's cost. So essentially, you're authorizing us to spend this money out of the fund, but the money will ultimately end up back in that fund balance via payment from the county. There is sufficient reserves in the fund for the time to cover that, depending on the timing of when we get that money. So with that, I will see if you have any questions, and then again, we'll talk about the transfer later on.
Any questions of Mr. Barris?
I don't have a question for him, but just to add some context to it. We've talked about this with Downtown District Committee for a long time, and I know that we're going to talk about the fiscal action later. This is a continuation of the streetscape movement that we've been talking about for many, many years. And it was always a part of the plan, and then when the citizen nonprofit, Gordon Family, when they stepped up to donate private dollars to this, it kind of flipped the order that we were going to go at. So it is certainly something that will absolutely beautify downtown. Is a great project, but I have gotten some questions on how that order came into place. I think it is important to specify.
Thank you. Okay, we need to establish a public hearing for 1503-22 at our next regular meeting. Could I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of establishing a public hearing for ordinance 1503-22, raise your right hand. 7-0. Council to consider ordinance 16-03-22, an ordinance of the City of Noblesville, Indiana, approving and authorizing the execution of leases relating to the financing and acquisition of real estate for the development of Innovation Mile in the city, pledging local income tax revenues to the City of Noblesville Redevelopment Commission for the payment of lease rentals in connection therewith, and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Good evening, President Wiles, members of council. Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director. For the record, council, recall from your February 22nd meeting, you authorized the strategic investment to acquire 77 acres within Innovation Mile. This ordinance before you approves and authorizes the proposed financing with regards to that strategic investment. And as proposed, that structure is a combination of short and long-term financing for an amount not to exceed $11 million. Procedurally speaking, this is an ordinance for first reading tonight, so there is not action being requested from you. If all goes to plan, we'll be back before you for approval consideration at your next meeting. And we also vetted this proposal with Chairman Davis and this council's finance committee. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Murray? If not, we will see you at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Council to consider ordinance 17-03-22, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the City of Noblesville, Indiana, taxable economic development revenue bonds, Series 2022, Washington Business Park 2 project, and the lending of the proceeds thereof to Patch Development LLC, and authorizing and approving other actions in respect thereto.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Haberman.
Good evening. You'll recall at the last meeting we approved the economic development agreement for Washington Business Park Phase 2. This is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond at $7 million to Patch Development to finance the infrastructure improvements on that property. Most importantly, the extension of North Point Boulevard, which will be the main thoroughfare of the park. It's important to note this is a developer purchase bond, so there's no risk to the city there. We'll pledge 65% of the bond. That will leave 35% coming back to us. We anticipate over the life of that bond, the 25 years, to generate about $10 million in revenue. And so this ordinance was presented to the Finance Committee with a favorable recommendation. And so I'm happy to answer any questions there. The second part is the resolution of the RDC, basically approving the plan to amend this property and take it out of Corporate Campers West and then create a new allocation area within Washington Business Park to capture that funding for the bond.
All right. Any questions of Mr. Haberman? Mr. O'Connor, you look like you're...
I don't have a question, but I wanted to put something in the record here that I don't think, unless you read these documents, you don't pick up on the data, but it says the projects are anticipated to facilitate the growth and diversification of the property tax base, including additional investment in the area, which is the Washington Business Park area, combined from businesses in the estimated amount of at least $135 million in the next 6 years. And that's meaningful. That's 1,500,000 square feet of new commercial space, which will probably amount to maybe 1,000 or more jobs in Washington Business Park. So from the taxpayer's perspective, we're driving a higher assessed value, and that continues to help us do the different things we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint and hearkening back to the residential development we just discussed. Without these kinds of projects and a 1% property tax cap, it's very difficult. So we need more of these projects, so I just thought I would put that on the record.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Haberman at this time? Seeing none, we will see you in 2 weeks at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Next item is council to consider ordinance 18-03-22, an ordinance defining the purpose, objectives, and guidelines for the residential facade improvement grant program.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Mr. Head.
Good evening, President Wiles, members of the council. Before you this evening.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. It is an ordinance that defines the purpose, objectives, and guidelines for the residential facade improvement program for the city of Noblesville. And this particular program is in collaboration with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Historic Preservation Division. And this is in connection with the Pleasant Street expansion project, in which the city has an application in order to remove 4 structures from a historic district, the Plum Prairie District. And then we have partnered with Indiana DNR to provide additional investment in our other historic districts, as well as the Plum Prairie District. And this particular ordinance is specific to Plum Prairie District, and then also the 3 other historic districts that we have in the city of Noblesville. So you'll see on this particular map here, you have the 3 districts where funds will be available here, here, and here. These areas, there will be $25,000 available for grants, available in the increments of up to $5,000 per project, and it's a 50% matching reimbursable grant to property owners that have residential uses as their primary use of their dwellings. Then, as well as those historic districts, the Plum Prairie District, in which our expansion project is happening currently, that will happen in the top area here, is also being granted $25,000 for residential property facade improvements. And why that's important is we have allocated $50,000 total per year for the next 3 years to be invested into our historic districts. So again, $25,000 in the Plum Prairie District, where you'll have the Pleasant Street Improvement Project, and then an additional $25,000 in our other 3 historic districts. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I will like to add as well that we've developed the guidelines in connection with Noblesville Preservation Alliance and Indiana Landmarks. We've all reviewed the guidelines together. As you're aware, we have a pretty successful commercial facade grant program that we've been running for over a decade. I've been in charge of that for a number of years, as well as the Facade Grant Review Committee will also be overseeing these residential grants, and some of those individuals have been reviewing facade grants for over a decade. So the group is very well adept at reviewing the grants, and we're very comfortable with the ordinance that we have here today. In addition, if you're so inclined, we would ask that you could suspend the rules and adopt the ordinance on first reading. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Head? Mr. O'Connor?
So it's the same facade committee that's going to be approving both?
Correct.
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move that we waive the rules and pass on first reading ordinance 18-03-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to waive the rules and suspend the rules. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0.
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I would move we approve ordinance 18-03-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 1803-22. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Sparks,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Abstain.
Ms. Wiles.
Aye.
That's 6 aye, 0 nay, 1 abstention. The ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to miscellaneous item number 1, council to consider resolution RC-11-22, a resolution amending resolution RC-41-21, adopting a plan for distribution of the proceeds of the city's grant from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Mr. Light.
Thank you, President Wiles, members of council, Matt Light, Deputy Mayor, in front of you for consideration is an amendment to the spending plan, essentially, for the American Rescue Plan funds that are received by the city of Noblesville. This change reflects a change that was made in the final Treasury rule that was adopted. The interim final rule that was adopted in May of 2021 was what we based the original spending plan on. The final rule that was adopted subsequently gave more flexibility to local units to use the funds, which is helpful. You've appropriated some of those funds that have come into Noblesville's hands, and this resolution tracks with that final rule and gives flexibility to use all of our funds for any governmental purpose, which is what was allowed for any dollars that were received, any communities that received $10 million or less. So I would appreciate your consideration of the change.
Any questions of Mr. Light? Mr. O'Connor?
Do we anticipate, Matt, receiving the money in July similarly to 21?
That's correct. That's the expectation.
3.106 million?
Correct.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
I would move that we approve resolution RC-11-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution RC-11-22. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Okay. Miscellaneous item number 2. Council to consider resolution RC-10-22. A resolution approving, 1, a declaratory resolution, an amended and restated economic development plan of the Noblesville Redevelopment Commission, enlarging the Noblesville, Washington Business Park Economic Development Area, which declaratory resolution also establishes a separate allocation area and removes certain property from the State Road 37, 146th Street Economic Development Area and Corporate Campus West Economic Development Area. And 2, the order of the Noblesville Planning Commission related thereto. Mr. Haberman, what a mouthful, wow.
I was so excited I talked about it the last time I was up here. So this is the next action in approving the incentive for the Washington Business Park Phase 2. So as you just so eloquently said, this will effectively take the 67 acres that was acquired for Washington Business Park Phase 2 out of Corporate Campus West and create a new allocation area for Washington Business Park Phase 2 so that we can capture the funding, the tax increment financing funding from the bond, which we passed earlier.
Any questions of Mr. Haberman?
Madam President,
Mr. Smith?
I move to approve resolution RC-10-22.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve resolution RC-10-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6, any nays? Any abstentions? So 6 in favor, 1 abstention. Thank you very much. You're just going to hang out now, so. Okay, these I will read all together. Council to consider resolution RC-12-22, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with Texton Towel and Supply, as well as council to consider resolution RC-13-22,
I was going to request, but yeah.
Might as well.
Council to consider Resolution RC-13-22, a declaratory resolution designating property as an economic revitalization area and authorizing a tax abatement for Texton Properties LLC. I'm going to do those two together. We'll do the next one.
Sure.
So. Mr.
So,
Haber.
this is relating to Texon Tao, the project Texon Tao, as you shared. And I would like to acknowledge Wayne Katulik is in the audience. He's the owner of Texon Tao, a family-owned Noblesville business located on Harriman Drive in Stony Creek Business Park. Currently, they're planning to acquire property on Endeavor Drive, 7.5 acres, and develop the projects that we'll discuss here now. This project will be developed in 2 phases, so that's why there are 4 items in front of you. The first would be Texon 1, second Texon 2. They're utilizing some SBA funding to make this happen. And so in total, they will invest $11.6 million. They will construct 102,000 square feet of commercial space and create 57 jobs. Texon 1 is where they will relocate their headquarters from Harriman to Endeavor Drive. That property, or that project, will be incentivized with a 10-year tax abatement, declining over those 10 years. And so the action for that would be to approve the economic development and then agreement, and then establish a revitalization area on the property that you see on the screen. This was brought in front of the Finance Committee and given a favorable recommendation. So we will also need to set a public hearing for April 26th.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith,
I move that we establish a public hearing for our meeting on April 26th.
for Resolution RC-.
RC-13-22.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to establish a public hearing on April 26th. All those in favor, raise your right hand.
And we need to approve. Yep. Madam President, I move to approve Resolution RC-12-22 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-12-22. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, 7-0. Okay. Right, the 1322.
Madam President,
Mr. Smith,
I move to approve Resolution RC-13-22.
Second.
it has been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-13-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Council to consider Resolution RC-14-22, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with Texton Properties 2 LLC. And then council is also to consider Resolution RC-15-22, a declaratory resolution designating property as an economic revitalization area and authorizing a tax abatement for Texton Properties 2 LLC.
This is phase 2 of the Texon project. As I shared before, they're utilizing SBA funding, which has criteria on the size of the projects. This is a second building which will be completely leasable, and they have agreed to build within 3 years of phase 1. And it's going to be abated at 3-year tax abatement, declining over those 3 years. Again, this is presented to the Finance Committee with a favorable recommendation, and I will gladly answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of Mr. Haberman?
Madam President?
Mr. Smith?
Did he?
Go ahead.
Okay. I move that we establish a public hearing for RC-15-22 for our April 26th meeting.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to establish a public hearing for Resolution RC-15-22 at the April 26th meeting. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0.
Madam President?
Mr. Smith?
I move to approve Resolution RC-14-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-14-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0.
And one final time, Madam President, I move to approve Resolution RC-15-22 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-15-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council to consider Resolution RC-16-22, a resolution to opt back into the opioid settlement pursuant to Indiana Code 4-6-15-2.
Good evening, Council. Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. I'm here tonight on a resolution to opt back into the opioid settlement. As you recall, last year we opted out of the opioid settlement due to some 2021 legislation that was not as favorable to municipalities and, among other things, would have limited our recovery of any funds that we would have received in the opioid lawsuits. So in 2022, they have changed that legislation and made it a little bit more advantageous for municipalities, and we will be receiving, rather than 15% of settlement funds, we'll be receiving 50% of settlement funds. And so we would ask that council approve the opt back in so that we can receive those settlement funds. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Questions of Ms. Bennett?
Madam President,
Mr. O'Connor?
I move we approve RC-16-22 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve Resolution RC-16-22. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Thank you very much. Transfers. Council to consider transfer TA-08-22, an appropriation transfer in the Downtown Development Fund to reallocate funding for the Logan Street Bridge enhancement, also known as the Bridge of Flowers. Mr. Barris.
Thank you, council members. Once again, Sam Barris, Office of Finance and Accounting. This is the transfer resolution that I mentioned earlier. So it is the second part of our funding you're being asked to approve tonight for the Logan Street Bridge enhancements, again, also known as the Bridge of Flowers project. So in that case, you were approving an additional appropriation earlier in the evening, or first reading of that, for $362,000. This represents a transfer of money that was already part of the 2022 budget, in this case $402,000. So this is funding that was unallocated at the point of adoption of the 2022 budget in the Downtown Development Fund, and our protocol for that is it gets parceled out with the guidance of the Downtown District Committee throughout the year. In this case, we're using this money to further that Bridge of Flowers project. And so very literally what's happening is the money is being transferred from Department 000, which is non-departmental contingency, to 023, which is parks improvement and rehabilitation projects. And it might seem a little weird that this is a parks project, but based on our internal discussions, it made more sense to classify it that way than a road or street improvement, because it really is kind of like a parks amenity. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I will say that of the $425,000 that was unallocated from the Downtown Development Fund in the budget, all of that is still unallocated, so this would allocate all but about $23,000 of that money.
Any questions for Mr. Barris? I would like to just make a point that we do still have funds from previous years in the Downtown District or Development Fund that have not been expended. So this will not completely zero out or get us down to $25,000 in that fund, so that we can still continue to do some of the other projects that we've been talking about. Some more black streetlights. Yes.
That is correct, yeah.
With that, I'll make a motion, Madam President, to approve transfer TA-08-22.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-08-22 as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Thank you all very much. We have come to the end of the agenda. Do we have any council comments this evening? Mr. O'Connor.
I think I would be remiss to not thank our city attorney for all of her work while she's been an employee here at the city. I think this is her last council meeting, so I appreciate all your work and effort on behalf of the taxpayers and the council and the administration for everything you've done. So we hate to see you go, but things change, and I'm sure you'll have great success in your new endeavors. So thank you for all your work and everything you've done.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would also like to recognize Jamie Yost, who has been our IT director. This is also his last council meeting. He has been instrumental in updating our council chambers for technology purposes as well as across city departments. So we thank you very much for your hard work and dedication to the city of Noblesville, and we will miss you very much. So thank you very much. Anything else? We are adjourned.